Oh, good. Looks like the neighborhood hasn't been incinerated. Yet. Between the copious gasoline and the dragons, I was starting to wonder if we'd come back to a suburban inferno. If you tuned in for the last sketch, you already know all the mouth-puckering details about gastric acid. Well, this sketch covers 4 digestive secretions that work hand in hand with gastric acid to ensure proper digestion: pepsinogen, intrinsic factor, bicarbonate, and secretin. So slather on your fire retardant and let's get started. I feel a bit more comfortable that the dragon manning the grill is the town's fire chief, a perfect representation of chief cells. Chief cells secrete the proenzyme pepsinogen, an inactive precursor to the protein digesting enzyme pepsin. And while grilled pepperoni doesn't sound all that appetizing to humankind, on second thought, that actually sounds really good. That proteinaceous meat stick is a great representation of pepsinogen. The main stimulus for pepsinogen secretion from chief cells is increased vagal stimulation during the gastric and cephalic phases, which is why the fire chief is wearing his lucky I Heart Vegas apron. Gastric acid itself also triggers the release of pepsinogen by initiating a local cholinergic reflex. So our chief here is staying hydrated with that highly acidic lemonade. But pepsinogen isn't very useful in its inactive zymogen form. That's where gastric acid comes in. Pepsinogen is converted to pepsin in the lumen of the stomach in the presence of H+. And trust me, once you slice and dice that pepperoni and add a squeeze of lemon, you've got yourself a gourmet treat. Or at least that's what they tell me. Speaking of lemons, I'm a bit parched. This Poridol stand represents parietal cells, epithelial cells of the stomach that secrete gastric acid and intrinsic factor. Gastric acid is a pretty big deal, so it's got its very own sketch that we highly recommend consuming. It's the perfect combination of sour and sweet. For this video, we'll focus on intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor binds vitamin B12, otherwise known as cobalamin, so it can be absorbed into the terminal ileum. These intrinsically dangerous firework boxes holding cobalt blue fireworks should remind you that intrinsic factor binds B12. Looks like the dragons busted out the black market bottle rockets this year. They always get the good stuff from Vegas. Like gastric acid, intrinsic factor is released primarily in response to vagal stimulation. That is, unless something interferes. This troublemaking dragonling shooting antibody arrows is a reminder that low intrinsic factor is often the result of an autoimmune condition. Autoantibodies can actually attack either parietal cells or intrinsic factor itself, which is why these antibody arrows are stuck in the Poridol lemonade sign and an intrinsically dangerous fireworks box, or more specifically, an empty intrinsically dangerous fireworks box. Less intrinsic factor around a bind B12 means less B12 can get absorbed by the small intestine. Eventually, B12 levels in the blood decrease too, resulting in pernicious anemia. Alright, I've become pretty attached to both of my eyes, so let's get away from this arrow situation and check out our next secretion. All this acid floating around would eat right through the stomach lining if it weren't for some sort of buffer. This snail is on it. Literally, he's knocked over the box of baking soda to represent the bicarbonate-rich mucus secreted by the stomach's mucus cells. Bicarbonate neutralizes gastric acid to protect the delicate epithelial lining from self-digestion, which is why the snail was sure to get baking soda all over these acidic lemons. Okay, this secretive sea creature was definitely not invited to the block party, but he does symbolize sea cretin, which technically isn't a gastric secretion anyway, so I guess he can stay? Secretin is released by S cells in the small intestine, primarily in the duodenum, which is why he's rocking the duodenum look with a jean vest and cutoffs. He's also quenching his thirst with a large lemonade, because secretin is released in response to acid in the small intestine. One look at the stink eye he's given the lemonade stand should clue you in that secretin does not like gastric acid. Yep, secretin acts on parietal cells to decrease gastric acid production. It also triggers the pancreas to release bicarbonate into the duodenum to increase the pH of the small intestine. That's why our brooding sea creature is pouring out a trail of baking soda. He definitely looks like he's up to no good, though. I think we should wrap up before things get dicier than those grilled pepperonis. Pepsinogen, intrinsic factor, bicarbonate, and secretin work alongside gastric acid to enable digestion. Chief cells secrete pepsinogen, a precursor to pepsin, while parietal cells secrete gastric acid and intrinsic factor. Vagal stimulation increases secretion from both cells. Autoimmune attacks on parietal cells or intrinsic factor can cause B12 deficiency, among other digestive issues. Mucus cells release bicarbonate to neutralize gastric acid. Secretin is released from S cells of the small intestine once acidic chyme enters the duodenum to downregulate gastric acid secretion from parietal cells. Secretin also stimulates bicarbonate release from the pancreas into the duodenum to increase intestinal pH. With that, I'm going to leave these guys to duke it out on their own and go check out the fireworks show. See ya!